In this video, we're going to be going over how to set up two DN9680s and converting them from single mode fiber to multi-mode fiber in a step-by-step procedure, as well as how to do the firmware updates and configuring the two DN9680s to work with the Neutron NB card installed in the Neutron DSP engine. In another video, I do cover the front panel of the DN9680 with the status lights and the LCD screen. Currently, because we're going to be doing the multi-mode conversion on these two 9680s, I went ahead and left them off. But in case you don't catch that video, I'm just going to cover some of the things on the front panel. So let's take a look again. Here on the far left, we have our status light for our Ethernet control. This is where we're going to be plugging in a Cat5 cable into the Ethernet control port on the back, connecting to our laptop to be able to configure and do any firmware updates to the DN9680. Next, we have the 8 AES50 port status lights. On the top, these are green LEDs to indicate that we have correct connection. Below that, we have 8 red LEDs that'll indicate a fault or no devices connected. Next is the snake connection indicator lights. This is letting us know that the DN9680 is either configured for optical, which is our fiber, or copper, which is our Cat5e cables. Next, we have our clock source indication lights. This is letting us know that our DN9680 is either configured to the internal clock, an external AES50, or the external snake. And finally, we have our LCD display. On the top row of the LCD display, it's going to give us the IP address of the actual unit. This information is not something we need to be too worried about. The second line is going to give us our connection status for any of the devices plugged into the 8 AES50 ports. In the bottom right-hand corner, we're going to be indicated with an S, which would stand for single mode operation, or an M if it's in multi-mode operation. Now, let's look at the back of the two DN9680s. On the right side, we have the universal power supplies. This will allow us to use the device anywhere around the world. Next, we have our optical connection. This optical connection is a Neutrik Opticon Duo connector. This is where I'm connecting my fiber connections to. Next, we have our copper connection, which we use standard Cat5e, and we could use an Ethercon connector. Next is the Ethercon control. This is where we're going to be plugging in our Cat5 cable into our laptop to be able to access the DN9680 for firmware updates, as well as setting up the configuration of the DN9680. Next, we have our 8 AES50 ports. These are all Neutrik Ethercon connections, where we could use standard Cat5e cables. Next, we're going to be going through the multi-mode conversion. Straight out of the box, the DN9680 ships in a single mode fiber. The reason for that is so that way between two DN9680 units, you can get a maximum distance of 1,500 meters. With the multi-mode conversion, the distance between two DN9680s is 500 meters, and this is okay for me. The reason why I'm switching to the multi-mode system is because I'm currently using Midas multi-mode fiber optic cables. And if you're doing that as well, if you were to plug this into a stock DN9680, the two units are not going to see each other. So that's why we need to make the change. If you already have two DN9680s stock mode, you're going to need to order the DN9680 MM kit, which stands for multi-mode. Now, just to be aware, one DN9680 MM kit is going to come with two of these multi-mode conversions in there to cover the two DN9680s. You do not need to order two DN96 MM kits. Now, we're going to remove the top of the DN9680 and remove the single mode fiber cable and replace it with the multi-mode fiber cable kit. To take the top off, we're going to use a T10 to remove the 5 chassis screws along the top, as well as the 5 chassis screws on the back, the 4 chassis screws here on your right side, and the 5 chassis screws on your left side. Let's go ahead and do that. Now that the screws are removed, we can go ahead and lift the plate off and put that to the side. Here we see the single mode fiber cable installed. I'm going to start here on the optical connector and remove the cable here. To remove that, we simply press down on the tab. I usually like to take the T10 to help push in on the connector to easily guide it out. Now, to remove this end of the cable, we need to remove the guard and just snap it back. Now, for this side, we have to go ahead and push down on the blue tab to remove the cable from this housing here. Now, to get the cartridge out, we flip down this little lever here in the front, and now we could pull the cartridge out and place it to the side. Be careful not to confuse the single mode with the multi-mode. When you open your multi-mode kit, the two components are going to be separated, which is good because that's how we need to install it. For now, I'm going to put the multi-mode fiber cable to the side. I'm then going to insert the sleeve with the circuit board facing down. We can push on the front of this just to make sure that we're locked in place for a firm, secure connection. Now, we take our multi-mode fiber cable with the tab facing upwards towards us, and we gently place it inside the connector. You will hear it snap into place to letting us know that it's connected firmly. At this point, we could route the rest of the fiber optic cable through to reach the optical connector on the back of the panel. Now that the fiber cable is routed to the rear optical connector, we can go ahead and gently insert it into the optical connection. Once in, we will hear it click. Now we know that the fiber cable is securely in place, and we can go ahead and put the top back on and put the screws back in. Now that we have the two DN9680 multi-mode kits installed, we have to now update the firmware and then configure the box. So let's go ahead and do that. To download the firmware for the DN9680, we need to head to musicgroup.com and find the Clark Technic information for the DN9680 to be able to access the download file. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's click on the tab for brands. As we scroll down, we see all of the brands under the Music Group umbrella. For this, we need to click on Clark Technic. Now that we've accessed this page, let's go ahead and click on the Products tab. If we scroll down, we will find the DN9680. Now that we're on the home page for the DN9680, let's click on the Download tab. If we scroll down, we'll find the firmware on the bottom. Currently, the latest firmware is software version 1.5. So let's click on that to download it. The download is now heading to our desktop, and once the download is done, we're ready to move on to the next part. To connect our computer to the DN9680, we need to take a standard Ethernet cable and plug it into our computer. Some modern computers, especially laptops nowadays, don't have an Ethernet port, so you can go ahead and get yourself an adapter and patch that into your computer. Now that our laptop is connected, we can connect the other side of the Ethernet cable into the Ethernet control port on the back of the DN9680. Here, we're going to update the firmware for the two DN9680s. This process, we're going to do one at a time. So, we're going to go ahead and click on our DN9680 folder for the update. Here, you see, we have several files in the folder. Let's go ahead and click on the README First PDF. Here, we have the step-by-step update procedure for the DN9680. Since we have to disconnect the Wi-Fi and connect manually to the DN9680, as you see here in the settings, let's go ahead and turn off our Wi-Fi and then open up our network preferences. We can select on our Ethernet and then manually assign the IP address. Now, we can toggle back to the PDF where it's going to give us the IP address and the subnet mask information. We see here in 3A that we have the IP address that we need to set. Let's copy and paste that and head back over to the network preferences. We can paste that in and head back and copy the subnet mask. We see that the subnet mask is the same, but I'm going to go ahead and paste it in anyways. Here, we can hit apply. Now you notice that the Ethernet is connected. Now, we need to open up an internet browser. For DN9680s that have firmware older than 1.5, Safari on any Apple computer will not work. So, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use Firefox. You'll notice in the manual that it suggests that you use Firefox as well. Now, we need to go ahead and enter in the IP address for the DN9680. We could do this by looking at the front of the unit or heading over to the PDF and copying and pasting it. It's very important to make sure that the IP address that you're putting into the browser matches the same one on the front of the unit, or it will not connect. Here, you see that we have the configuration window. Now, down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that the firmware version is the older version, and we have the new one downloaded. So, let's click on Update Firmware. We're presented with the option to browse for a selected file. So let's go ahead and click on Browse. Let's click on the downloaded DN9680 folder, and we will have to select on the DN9680 Updater Part 1 of 2. Once we select it, we click Open. Now the file is loaded and we can hit update. Here you see the DN9680 has started the updated procedure. You could also notice on the front of the DN9680 that it's telling you that the update is in progress. It's very important not to disconnect the power or the Ethernet connections between your computer and the DN9680. As we see on the front of the DN9680, part 1 of 2 is now done. So back on the laptop, we're going to go ahead and re-enter the IP address in. Here we have the browser window again, so we'll click on it, and now we can select the DN9680 1.50 build6.tar. This is the file. Once we selected that, we click update, and the DN9680 will resume the update procedure. Now that our firmware updates are done for both DN9680s, I'm currently connected to my front of house DN9680. So to configure that, I need to go ahead and put the IP address back in. Here we have the configuration window up. We see that the firmware has been updated to 1.5. For the IP address allocation, let's leave this manual. This is not something we need to be worried about. Same thing for DHCP. We could just leave this off. Next is the snake selection. If we're going to be using the standard Ethercon cables on Cat5e, we can leave copper selected. If you're going to be using optical with the multimode, just like I am, then we need to go ahead and select optical. Next, we have our clock source. Now this is very, very important that we get this right. Because we're going to have the DN9680 at front of house that we have connected right now, we need that to receive the clocking information from the DN9680 that's going to be on the stage side. That DN9680 unit is going to be receiving its clocking from the external AES-50 from the Neutron engine. So here in front of house, we need to go ahead and select external snake. I'm also going to leave 96 kilohertz selected because that's the sample rate I want to work at. Here on the right, we have the ability to auto-hunt external AES-50 clock sources on all of the ports. You can leave all of these checked in or unselected. For now, I'm going to go ahead and select all of them. Now that we've made all of our setting selections, we can hit the change settings and it'll update the DN9680, and all of the selections that we've made are going to be reflected on the front of the DN9680. This makes the DN9680 for my front of house rack ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and install that in the rack, and then we're going to do the stage DN9680 configuration. Now at my front of house rack, I have the DN9680 mounted in and connected to everything. If we look down here on the bottom right hand side of the display screen, we see the letter M. Again, that's to let us know that the unit's been converted to multimode. Here on the left hand side, you see ports 1 through 7 are illuminated green, letting us know that it's connected to all of my devices. Again, and I can't stress this enough, with number 8 not connected to any devices, that's why we have this red error light. It is okay for us to operate the system while we have an error light on the DN9680s. Here we can see that we have a positive connection with our optical snake between the front of house DN9680 and the stage DN9680. We can also confirm that we have the optical snake selected. And last, we have our clock source. Just to reiterate that this is extremely important that we configure the two DN9680s properly, because if we don't, then we're not going to have connection between the two devices. Here, I have the clock set to external snake. That's because it's getting the clock information down the optical fiber snake that's connected to the DN9680 on the stage. The stage DN9680 is plugged into the back of the Neutron, and it's getting its clocking source from the external AES. Now that we've completed all the connections and everything is working, let's move on to the next step. Now I have my stage DN9680 firmware updated, and now I need to do the configuration. Once again, the IP address is not something that we need to worry about. The same with the DHCP server information. The snake selection, if we're going to be using Ethercon Cat5 cable, we'll leave that engaged, but again, my system is going to be using the optical connection. It's very important that you have the snake selection for the two units matching. So here, we're going to click on optical. Now for the clock source, I need to go ahead and select external AES-50. External AES-50 is going to allow the DN9680 to receive its clocking information from the Neutron DSP card. For our sample rate, again, I'm going to leave this at 96 kilohertz. it's very, very important that we make sure that both DN9680s have the same sample rate, or we're going to have clocking issues. Here on the right, the auto hunt, I'm going to go ahead and engage all of the auto hunt features for all the ports. Now I've checked off all the selections that I want. Let's click on the change settings to apply them. Now the DN9680 is going through the configuration updates, and we'll see that our selections on the front of the DN9680 match our selections in the configuration. Now that the settings have been confirmed, I can go ahead and install this into my stage rack and then make all the final connections and get the system up and running. Now that I have my stage DN9680 mounted in the rack, if we look here on the bottom right of the display, we see that we have a letter M. This is letting us know that the multimode conversion has been done. If we look over here on the left side, we see AES50 audio on 1 through 7 is connected to all of our devices. As I mentioned in another video, if we don't have anything plugged in, like I don't here on number 8, it's okay. This is not going to have any ill effect on the system. Next, we have our snake connection showing that the optical snake is connected to the one at front of house. Here we see that we do have the optical snake connection engaged. And finally, the most important thing, we see that we have external AES50 being the clock source. That's because we're receiving the clock source from the Neutron engine.